we'll get going. It's great to talk to you. Thanks a million for taking time out.
Thanks for being patient.
I usually start off like talking about coffee. Whereabouts are you based?
Canada.
Whereabouts in Canada?
Oh, Northern Ontario.
Okay, what's like? Are you in a city or a town or what?
Sault Ste. Marie, Echo Bay.
Go bigger, go broader. Like
Uh,
my Canadian geography is lower than that.
Yeah, sure. So we're about 8 hours west of Toronto.
Okay, all right. Okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
kind of have a vague idea now. Do you
Well, if
drink a
you
lot?
look at the three Great Lakes in Canada,
Yeah.
that's the one thing that shows up on every map is the three Great Lakes. We are precisely where they meet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In the water.
Literally on
the
an
shore.
island. Yeah.
Do you drink a lot of coffee?
A ton, nonstop.
And are you like snobbish about it, or just whatever is hot in a cup?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have enough access to the good stuff to be snobbish about it, but I do appreciate good coffee.
Yeah. I read a line on your website, I think, and it said that this kind of all started at like 4 o'clock in the morning on a park bench or something when you were like ankle deep in PT clients and trying to wade your way through. Is like is early mornings and all that kind of stuff, is that like behind you, or is that something that you started with the job you're in and you've maintained because it's like productive or whatever?
Yeah, when I was a personal trainer, a lot of people would want to book at 6 a.m. And so you'd typically get up around 4:30. We live a half an hour from town. So that became my routine early. And now I still get up by 5:30. And whenever I get stuck, I go back to this one primary habit of do one thing to grow your business before you do anything else. And so I make a coffee, I come into my basement and I work on one thing to grow the business, and then I'll open up my email, open up Facebook, etc. after that. So I do still get a pretty early start because there's nobody to interrupt me at 5:30 a.m.
What kind of things do you do? Because I'm curious of, if someone told me, now this isn't really a business, I suppose, so it's probably different. But if someone told me like, oh, do something there that will grow your platform, we'll say, I could easily sit for like 3 hours being like, oh, what the fuck do they mean? Like what?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the early days, what was happening was I was getting advice from a mentor that I could barely afford to pay his bill. And I would go and he would tell me what to do. And then I'd get back to the gym and just be like overwhelmed with requests from people and classes to train and, my own workouts to do and stuff. And then finally, what I realized was like, if I don't create even a half an hour to do some of this work first thing in the morning, it will never happen. Things will never change and I'll never, get out of this. And so that's what I started doing, was just taking a half an hour. And then over time, what would happen is I would complete his checklist and say, okay, now what? And I would just start writing notes to myself, like, here's what I did, here's what worked. And that became the blog, that became the book, that became the big company, really. So, in your shoes, what is the primary function of a podcast? Well, it's to reach a broader audience, and it's to get the audience to take some action. Like, a podcast is usually either the top or close to the top of a funnel for something. And so, if your goal is just reach an audience and it's fun, then I would say I would spend 30 minutes every day expanding my audience before I did anything else. And so you say, well, how do I expand my audience? Well, it's you reach out to people who have a larger audience than yours and you invite them on your show, or you get yourself invited onto their show, or you, put together your top podcast notes into a book that you give away for free to listeners or something, or you promote yourself in Facebook groups, or you find it, whatever that is, usually after 2 or 3 days of practice, you find yourself getting into this kind of flow of, okay, now I'm going to do this. And then you have the next idea as you go.
Yeah. When you were doing PT, was that like general, we'll say, Globo Gym type training, or was it CrossFit you were doing?
Well, I was doing PT in 1996, and Greg was still working in Global Gyms at that point. I think he was renting a jiu-jitsu studio in 1997. So um, at the time, what we were doing, I guess 96, 97, 98 was, I would still call it high intensity interval training, although nobody called it that then. We were following guys like Joe DeFranco, for example, people who actually like influenced Glassman later. You know, we were talking to some of them. I was actually writing for T Nation, and so I was interacting with Louis Simmons and Dave Tate, and we were doing a lot of the stuff they were talking about. So it was hard to define like what our original training style was, and that was really the point of CrossFit. Was it gave kind of a definition and a name to the stuff that a lot of independent trainers were doing. And that got Greg a lot of renown, but it also got him some hate in the early days, because people would say like, we're doing all the same stuff. I do kettlebells and sprints together, you know, he's not doing anything new. But the magic, at least back then, was kind of, you know, packaging it and making it a model. And that's where it had value.
Yeah. You have, there's a Two Brain podcast as well.
Mm-hmm.
And another line that I read on your website was, should your toilets in your gym be clean? Yes. Should they be cleaned by you? Probably not.
Right.
Why do you not host the podcast yourself?
More than half the time I do. And because my primary value to Two Brain right now is just expanding the audience. And that means partnerships. Sometimes it means acquisitions, but most of the time it means like being the person who sees all the data, sees the trends, gets 1,000 questions a month, and can kind of pull things together into something coherent that will actually help gym owners. And so most of the time it's easier to do that myself. 50% of the time, Mike Workington is the host of the podcast, sometimes Tiffy Thompson. And what they'll do is client interviews. And so Mike was actually a writer covering heavy metal music for a decade. He was amazing. They would send him backstage with like Motorhead, you know, or like, here, go get a quote from Lemmy. And so he's amazing like that. And then CrossFit scooped him up in 2007. He led the CrossFit media team for over a decade. And then when they killed their media team, we scooped up him and some others. So they do the part of that podcast too. But the real reason, honestly, is like, I think through writing. And so when I'm writing my podcast, I am organizing my thoughts and just making them more concise and actionable. And as I'm writing them, I can see like, does this have merit? Does this have value to the audience? And should I still be thinking more about this? And so, yeah, it is part of like our iterative process.
And when you started first, was it just you on the podcast? Was it? And then when it grew beyond that, or when you changed, when you like started switching up, is it hard to? I feel like this is gonna be a theme of questions I'm going to ask you throughout. But like, is it hard to give up that? Because when something's yours and it's your thing and you're doing it the way that you want to do it, and then you bring someone else in, you're kind of like, there's a release of responsibility there where you're like, okay, you're doing next week, don't fuck it up. Like, you know, like where there's kind of a weird pressure with it.
Well, at some point in every business, you have to hire people who are just better than you. And that happened in my gym with coaches. You know, I was a knowledgeable coach. I was not a good coach at 6 a.m. And we eventually hired a woman named Charity who was amazing at 6 a.m. Like woke up, you know, just sunshine and lollipops. And so she was a better coach. And I learned from that. Like, I'm not a good cleaner. I need to hire a better cleaner. And so when you have somebody like Mike Workington on your team, and this is a person who's a professional interviewer, and he's been like a media mentor to me for a decade, and you say, I've got to hand the podcast over to somebody. I mean, you turn it over to a veteran interviewer like Mike. You know, we have had some false starts there. I mean, we did try to hire professional journalists, but the interviews that we do are not journalistic in nature. It's more like, we want the story, we want the background, we want to travel with the guest through their pain into kind of the brighter tomorrow. And Mike is amazing at that. So
yeah, I think you can have someone who's a good interviewer and doesn't know the subject matter, or doesn't have this, you know, like their finger on the pulse kind of. Whereas if you have someone who's been around it a lot, they know they've empathized with similar scenarios for years, so they can, you know, ask better questions, I guess.
You know what I did screw that up though, Peter, was in the original audio version of Founder Farmer Tinker Thief, we hired Sean Woodland, who has an amazing voice. He's on a lot of CrossFit shows and stuff.
He presented some of yours as well, didn't he? Some of Two Brain.
Well, in Founder Farmer Tinker Thief, he read the whole book, and he did do some of our podcasts.
Yeah, right? I thought he did.
Yeah. And so in the case of the podcast, what we realized is that our audience is not games athletes, and that is where Sean really has an audience. So that didn't work. On the audiobook, he did a great job, but it's not the same as the author reading it, because there are always like kind of some inside jokes or some places even in the content where I'll just want to riff a little bit. And Sean or any reader is not going to do that. So the biggest piece of feedback, or the only piece of negative feedback I heard about that book, was we wish you had read it. And so I actually went back, and in the second version of it, I am the narrator.
Yeah, no, I like hearing the author read it. Like, say I read Fraser's book and I listened to it, and I was absolutely raging. Like, when after the introduction, someone else starts reading it, and I was like, and it's no, I can understand, like, you know, why, you know, I'm sure it's an arduous process to go through, like when you've gone through the whole process of writing the book, and then to sit down and be like, right, you have to read it now. But yeah, no, it is. I always think the author themselves is better.
The reason that, sorry, man,
sorry, go on.
No, the reason that most authors don't want to read their own book is because to the author, like, the book is never done and it's never good enough to be published. And so as they're reading the book, they're like, oh, I should have written that better. Or, you know, oh no, I got an update. And so they are tempted to like turn a 4-hour book into a 7-hour thing, or just like, you know, they have the bad habits that I do of like riffing on a subject a little bit more. And it's hard to have that discipline, but if you're an objective third party, it's really easy. You just read what's on the screen, right? So,
do you go to a studio to record it, or do you just record it yourself?
We have a studio. So Two Brain has a headquarters. We have an office building in Sault Ste. Marie. It's next to my gym, Catalyst, and there's like a good recording studio in there.
Yeah, that's good. You've written 5 books, is that right?
I'd have to stop and count. It might be 6. So.
So the first one was the blogs that you mentioned kind of turned into the first book.
So the first book I actually wrote was called Ignite Enrichment Through Exercise. And we had a program, we sold it a few years later, but IgniteGym.com was all about cognitive training and exercise. And we wrote and self-published that. And that's how I knew how to publish a book. So the next book, Two Brain Business, I just followed the same process to publish it. But that's, you know, that book is like 32,000 copies, blah, blah, blah. So like, that's kind of the real first book, you know?
Yeah. And has your process changed much, say, the actual writing of a book from, say, the first one to the most recent one?
Yeah, it's gotten a lot better, a lot clearer. Like if you read Two Brain Business, it's just a scattering of blog posts. There's no flow to it. You know, and Seth writes his books like that, but he does it really well, and his books are great. My book is not. And over time, what I've found is that the more I iterate on something, the clearer it becomes, and the more simple I can make it. So if you want like the best written book, it's probably Start a Gym, which is only, you know, 150 pages, because it's very concise. Do this right now. And the next book is actually, it will be like 60 pages. But if you want the book that people say are their favorites, it's honestly like the originals, because they have all the stories in them.
Yeah. Do you listen to podcasts as well?
Yeah, frequently.
What are your go-to?
So this morning I listened to ours. I like to listen to ours in hindsight. I read the transcripts from ours in hindsight. If I just look at my podcast list here, I listened to Alex Hormozi's this morning. He's getting better. I listened to Business School with Sharon Srivatsa. Sharon is my mentor now. I listen to Peter Attia fairly regularly. I still listen to Seth. And my gym has a brand new podcast that I'm just absolutely infatuated with called The Catalyst Method.
Is that like the coaches hosting it?
I do some of them, and I'm not infatuated with those ones, but like, yeah, the GM of the gym does an amazing job with it. And so I think there's maybe only half a dozen episodes out, but like I've seen the next 10, or I've heard the next 10, and they're amazing. So
when you say you listen back to your own, do you mean the ones that you didn't record or the ones that you did record?
both. So when somebody from my team does an interview with one of our clients, like I want to hear that. I love it. I get choked up every time. I usually wind up sending them flowers or something. So I'm just so thrilled for them. And then the ones that I record are usually shorter. So I'll listen to them like at the start of a bike ride when I'm warming up or something. And just to see like, is there a better way I could have said that? Or, did I do a good job of making that concise? That's all.
Yeah, I was speaking to someone at the weekend, and they were talking about editing their podcast, and they were like, "Oh, I take out the ums and ahs and stuff, and like that kind of bits." And then they were like, "Oh, like how long does it take you to edit yours?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't." I was like, "I take out the very beginning and I take out the very end. Like I take out the preamble and I take out the awkward bit where I'm trying to X out of the meeting or whatever." But I was like, I leave in the middle of it because that's that's how humans talk. Like because if I changed all that and then met someone in the street, they'd be like, "Oh, why he sounds real dumb when I'm talking to him in person. He's like stumbling across his words."
That's right.
Yeah, but I think I couldn't. I think even if I wanted to edit, I couldn't because I just wouldn't be able to listen to myself. I just I abhor listening to my own voice. Like I wouldn't. Now when I'm talking, I feel like I sound fine. But then when I hear it back, I'm like, oh, why did you say that? Like in my head now, I'm like, if I listen back to this bit, I'd be giving out to myself for talking for so long during this bit.
No, you're great. But we do have a producer at Two Brain, and this is all he does is he produces our podcast for us.
That's cool. Yeah. So 2016 is that that's like the beginning of what you do now? That's the beginning of Two Brain. Is that accurate?
It's the beginning of this setting, company,
I guess. Yeah.
So what happened was I got invited to speak in 2012, and I knew the other speakers were really good, and so I just self-published the book, and then immediately started getting calls from gyms, and it was about 50-50 CrossFit gyms. There were some other types of like fitness gyms, and there were also yoga gyms. And then one of the yoga gyms, it was an owner named Ginger in New Jersey. She's like, "Well, I have a mentor for my yoga gym. How much would you charge to mentor me?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Well, we get on a call every 2 weeks or whatever, and I tell you what my problems are, and you tell me how to solve them." And I said, "Well, I'll try my best, but I have no idea what to charge you." And so she said, "Well, here's what my yoga instructor charges me. I charge her half." And from there, 321 Go Project was selling websites at the time, and they had Chris Spieler doing business advice, and he hated it. And so they just reached out and said, "Hey, we just read your blog. Would you be interested in doing this?" And so I just kind of like brought the template to them. And then after less than a year, my schedule was full, and I was doing 40 mentoring calls a week and saying like, it's too much. Like I'm exhausted, and there's a waiting list. And so we said, let's put things into a course. And we did that. We sold a lot of courses. And then I started following up with everybody who had bought the course and saying like, did you get value? What action did you take? What was your ROI? And I found that people just weren't taking action on a course, right? Like courses are boring. So I was like, wow, I take it all back. Like I'll give all of you guys like some mentoring calls. And so that just overwhelmed me further. But there was a reluctance to change on the part of 321 Go Project. So I left when my contract expired there on February 13th, 2016. We opened Two Brain Business. We started with, I think, 15 or 16 clients. And now we have over 800 worldwide with, 2,000 alumni.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That number must make you like stop and think, or even like you had your summit last week in Chicago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
How many people were at that?
426.
And like at any point there, are you stopping me like, oh man, this is this is weird how like far it's come from writing a blog to people traveling from all over the world.
It's so surreal, honestly, that it's hard for me to process. But I will share that my favorite thing that happened, one of my favorite things that happened last weekend was, you know, I don't recognize everybody's face anymore, and it's been 3 years since I've seen anybody
Yeah.
in person too. So I'm walking through the lobby. It's very early in the morning, and this woman sees me, and she kind of, she's half like shyly smiling, and she's starting to like extend her hand and introduce herself. And then coming behind me is one of the mentors from my team, Ashley Hahn. And this woman looks around my shoulder and she goes, "Oh my God, it's Ashley," and like runs straight past me. And that was amazing to me because, originally the books were about my experience in my gyms, and everything was like an N=1 result. And now it's really not about that at all. I mean, we have a data set of like 16,000 gyms, and we publish all of the data for free every single year. And all the best practices that we teach almost entirely come from other gyms. So what will happen is we'll run like reports every single month. Who's got the most revenue? Who's got the most clients? Who's got the best retention, etc. And we'll identify the top 10 gyms in each category, and then we'll just call them and say, "What are you doing?" And then over time, we start to see these trends, and those trends are what gets put into our curriculum. So it's really not about my experience anymore, but I am still, largely the face of it.
Do any gyms like not say, like when you call and say what are you doing that's so successful? Do any of them just say like, no, it's our formula?
Nope. No, I mean, we really filter people when they're coming in, and honestly, we've never had a problem with that. Like, maybe there might be a reluctance to say, I don't want to share my Facebook ads publicly, but even in those cases, they'll share them with other Two Brain clients willingly.
Yeah. Can you remember, like, say that first, so the yoga gym that was, we'll say like that was kind of technically your first mentee.
Yeah.
Like when I feel like if someone came to me for advice and I was like, oh, this person's going to act on what I say. Like, it's different if someone says, oh, what do you think about like that person treating me like a bit of a dickhead? Like, how do you think I should react? And you're like, oh, just ignore it. Or, oh, like, maybe you should just have a conversation with, like, that's kind of inconsequential advice to be giving someone.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like, oh, I'm struggling to make my rate payment next month and this happened and that happened. And then it's like, oh God, like if I get the wrong advice here, this business could go under or it could get way worse or whatever. Like, can you remember that first call, and can you remember a point at which those kind of fears or doubts or insecurities about what you were saying went away, or did you ever have them in the first place?
Well, I definitely have them. Now I would say that we're always hyper aware that could happen. And, honestly, I'm glad that you brought that up because, there are business coaches, by the dozens showing up every day who really, I don't know if they just don't share that concern, but they tend to just report every new thing as the best thing, where we carefully analyze stuff to death before we tell anybody to do anything. And so in her case, I can remember just being cautious to say, here's what I did. And luckily I had a blog bank of like 350 posts or something where I had talked about a lot of stuff. So in those days, I would basically lean on like what my mentor had taught me. So she would say, how do I set my prices? And I would say, well, first let's talk about, what problem you're solving for your clients. And then how are you solving that problem? What services are you offering? And then, your method after that. And so the first few calls with her were kind of verbatim what my mentor had done with me. And then after that, it was, well, how do I get more clients? And so I said, well, here's what we've done at Catalyst. And, we set up a referral program, probably. I don't remember specifically, but the stuff that we were talking about didn't really have a name. But sometimes coaching is a collaborative process where you can just say, hey, Ginger, what have you done in the past that's worked? Oh, I did a free weekend trial. Cool. When was the last time you did that? 3 weeks ago. Want to do it again? Yeah. And so it's really just like they know the answer if you can unlock it for them.
Yeah. How long have you owned Catalyst for?
Oh, 2005.
Wow,
So
okay.
17 years, yeah.
And like, you know, when you like instigate a change, say in your gym, like when you or you advise someone else to, or that's where the trend with a certain gym is heading, that like, okay, we need to, we're going to make a change, or we're going to say, like you brought up pricing there, or you could change like the timetable, or you could change, you know, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever your offerings are, whatever. Is there like that kind of stuff brings to mind, you know, like a really like a solid football team, and then they get an influx of money and they buy like superstars, and it just falls to shit because the chemistry is off and there's
100%, man.
too much happens too soon, and it's all like are the changes that happen, is the ideal way to make them like small and often rather than like just ripping a band-aid off and doing it all at once, or is one better than the other, or does it depend?
It depends on the situation, which is a classic mentor answer. But I first want to say, man, like this is one of the best questions I've ever been asked on a podcast, and I've never heard it before. So in the beginning, I was making changes to Catalyst in small increments because I was scared and like really couldn't afford to lose a single client. And so over 3.5 years, the business really transformed. Now we can do that with another gym in a year, let's say, right? Like, but you can't change your pricing structure, change your offering, change your schedule, raise your prices, fire 2 coaches, hire 3 new coaches. Like you can't do that in 12 weeks. And so there is kind of this cadence that you have to establish. And some gym owners, they're all in, like they trust us and they would do all of that stuff the first week if we told them to, but we know, that's not good for your gym. And straight up, like honestly, I tend to use my gym as a petri dish way too much. So I test way too many things. And honestly, clients don't always like it. Staff don't always like it. So typically, the way it goes now is somebody in the group will say, I'm doing this thing, it's working. We'll take it to 5 to 10 other gyms and say, do you want to try this thing exactly the same way? And sometimes it's successful, like it's transferable to their gym. Sometimes it's not. And then we'll introduce it to the curriculum 3 to 4 months after we've heard it and it's been proven to work. And then, so every month we'll bring out new resources, but a lot of the times the resources are taking concepts that we've been talking about for a while and making them a lot clearer. So what we found is like the best way to get people results is to make the action really simple. So instead of me talking about you should do bring a friend Fridays once in a while, what we do now is we say you're going to do these in March, June, and November on this week. Here is the checklist. Here is the guide. And so a lot of the stuff that we publish internally is dramatically more powerful because it's so much more succinct. And new ideas do show up, but they don't just pop on the scene one night. We're usually talking about them, and then we give people like the full course 4 months later. That was a great question, man, and I'm not sure that I answered it. So if you want to ask it another way, we can go at it.
No, I might just end the podcast there, because if that's the best question you've ever been asked, it's all downhill from here.
No, now I'm intrigued to hear the next question. I think we're building up here. That's great.
What about members then? Because obviously, like, say, my largely like my experience of gyms is CrossFit gyms, so that's where, and it's what I assume anyway, the biggest portion of listeners I have is CrossFit based, so we'll stick there.
Yeah.
So community is obviously the thing that's lauded about CrossFit. Like if you follow any CrossFit gym, or most anyway CrossFit gyms on Instagram, community is at the top of their tree. It's their, driving force. It's their, I guess it's what pays the bills, but it's what keeps people coming back. I know it's why I go and why I always went, is the community aspect. But then these changes that you're talking about, so obviously if there's a price increase, that's good for business and it's good for the coaches, whereas members are going to be like, hang on a minute, like why, like I'm pretty happy paying less than I'm going to be paying the future. And then, maybe timetables change and members don't like that. And maybe, the industrial style gym is abandoned for a more boutique style gym and members don't like that. Or maybe, another coach is hired and members don't, or a coach is fired and members don't like that. Like, is member pushback something that is preempted, I guess.
Yeah, but in a lot of cases, like a rate increase is actually good for the members too, because a lot of CrossFit gyms, they fell into this myth that more members equals better gym, and so they set their rates, on the assumption that they're going to have 300 members, and then they're 5 years in, and they're like, Chris, I can never get above 100, or I can never get about 150. Where if they had set their rates for 100, based on 100 to 150 members in the first place, their rates would have been higher, but those 150 would have been getting an even better experience because coaches would have been getting paid better, and they would have had better equipment and better programming and more professionalism and more cleaners, So there are definitely, there's like this curtain between the clients and the owners of any business. And most of the time the staff even isn't behind the curtain. And so the clients will say, like, what a great community we have. I love our gym so much. And the owner is unable to pay themselves, and this actually happened to me early on. So I was a member at a gym called Northern Lights, and it was a great gym. I knew everybody in that place by name. They probably had 150 clients, and everybody knew the owner, and it was, inexpensive rates. They were letting me do personal training there for free. And then one night I get this call from the manager of the gym, Shane, and he says, Chris, you better get down here. I think you got a locker full of equipment, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, the bank's here and they're padlocking the doors. And that's what taught me, like, if low prices is not what builds community, community builds community, and value builds community. And to build value in relationships, like, the owner has to be well fed. They have to be well rested. They can't be overworked, or the gym's just going to go away. And that is the greater tragedy, is when the gym closes. So now, man, it's not painless when the gym owner figures this out. And sometimes they realize, like, I just cannot make it charging $100 a month when I've only got 100 clients and my rent is 50% of my revenue and my coaches have to eat, and so they have to slowly start increasing their rate. And the tough part about community is it's great for retention. It's really bad marketing. Like, it doesn't work. So then they have to start marketing, and that means new people coming in. But typically what happens when you've got, like, a low price gym is you attract people who are more affected by price, which means they're going to leave and find the cheaper option as it emerges anyway. And your community sucks because people are always washing in and out. And, this was really happening in Atlanta about 4 years ago. So Atlanta, Georgia, the owner of the original box in Atlanta told me, like, you can't charge more than $79 a month for CrossFit, and that's why I'm getting out. And, he would blame HQ for opening so many gyms in Atlanta. And then one of our gyms, Miles Davis, charged $200 a month. And everybody said, you're crazy, you're going to be out of business. But the top 10% of clients from all of the other gyms came to his gym. And now he's got this amazing community that he can afford to support and give, like, top quality care to, because he charged more at the time than anybody else.
Yeah. It's interesting, like, because, like, say the gym that I go to raised their prices. They did a big, like, refurb and a big extension, and, like, built upstairs, and they raised their prices. And I remember, like, I sent an email at the time saying, like, this is too much. Like, I was like, I have a mortgage, I have kids, I have childcare, I have, like, other things to pay, and, like, it's looking like I won't be able to stick around as much as I want, like, and I remember the email I got back said, well, all of the things that you're listing are things that we want, and that's why we have to raise the prices. And I was just,
damn, that's good.
I was like, fair play. I was like, that, like, answered exactly, it's just what I needed to hear, like, because it was like, it kind of refreshed it for me that, like, okay, it's not personal. It's not like, they just want more. It's like they want what everyone else has, and, that kind of way.
Yeah. Everybody thinks, like, the entrepreneur is doing well, right? When I was, 2008 or so, my nephew was going to his high school grad prom, And in North America, every kid wears a tuxedo to prom. And so he calls me up and he says, "Can I borrow your tuxedo?" And I said, "Greg, what the hell makes you think I own a tuxedo?" And he's like, "Well, you're rich." And I was like, "Greg, what are you talking about, dude? Like, ask your aunt. We're fighting over the grocery bill." And he's like, "Well, you own a business. You must be." And so from then on, I understood like the perception of the consumer is always that the business owner is successful if they're open, and it's
Yeah.
off, 70% of the time. That's not the case.
Yeah. With this kind of is a combine of the last two questions, I guess. But
Oh boy, this is going to be good.
like if you're let's not get too excited. At least wait, just think. You can think that silently, but don't say it out loud in case it's shit. When you do make a change, so when you decide like obviously I suppose the ideal scenario is that you catch a gym owner before they become a gym owner. And they have this, they can set their price rather than because having to change it is awkward because you're going to piss people off.
So
and you're going to have
right.
to have awkward conversations. And you're going to have, like, you're going to be thinking everyone's talking about it. You're going to be thinking everyone's pissed off about it, even if they're not. And some of them are, and some of them aren't. It just leads to there's a murkiness or whatever that lingers for a while. But if you are making a change like that, if you are increasing your rates, do you just say like, okay, Chris's advice is I'm charging $100, I should be charging $200. So then you just say, we're charging $200 now. Or are you like, okay, in 6 months' time, we're going to raise it to $125, and then in 3 months after that, we'll raise to $150. And I know some gyms do a founder's rate where it's like, you've been here all along, you always pay $100. Which I don't know how that sits with me because I'm kind of like, it's a bit weird. Like it's a bit like elitist or something, or I don't know, it's odd.
So, the answer is there's a process. So the first thing that we do is mathematically calculate what the gym should be charging. And there's different data points that go into this, but the point is that we get to a number and then we say, okay, now, how do we get you to that number? And that might be a 2-year plan. But, if let's say that the gym should be charging $200 a month and they're charging $150, the question we're going to ask is like, what is the easiest way to increase the value of the average member from $150 to $200? And if they're not doing any personal training, then we'll say, okay, let's introduce some personal training. And then we haven't increased the membership price, but the average revenue per member has gone up.
Okay, yeah.
Right. So now we're at like 165. And eventually, though, many gyms find it unavoidable to raise rates. And so the most we will ever tell a gym to raise their rates is 15%. And that includes removing discounts and changing their rates. And so typically, like if it's a gym where their rates are too low, but they're also giving like a 20% first responder discount or something, we have to navigate which one of these things is going to change first. And then typically we'll say, okay, we're going to take this step for now. 6 months from now, we're going to take that step. And then we're going to implement like an annual 3% standardized raise. And, it also took us a long time to figure out like how to present this properly. But the script that we use now and the process has been tested, 900 times in gyms around the world, and we know it works. So the other thing that we do is we prepare the gym owner by doing some calculations. So if we raise your rates from 150 to 160 per month, let's calculate how many members you can afford to lose. Okay, so we can afford to lose 12. Okay, now we're going to take out your member list and we're going to highlight the 12 people most likely to cancel if their membership goes up $10. So they highlight like Peter. And then we say, okay, now you're going to call those people in person first. You're going to talk about it. And you're going to give them the option to prepay up to 3 months at their current rate. But ultimately, in fairness, everybody has to be paying the same amount. And so I'm circling around to your point about the grandfathering. It would be embarrassing to me to have two people working out side by side, receiving the same level of expert coaching 10 years after I opened, and one paying $100 and one paying $200. Like I would be mortified if the $200 person found out that the other guy was at $100. And it's because, my training gets better, my facilities get better, I invest in mentorship, I have better processes, better staff, better equipment. Like it's only natural that the value is evolving, and so should the price.
I guess unless you tell the $100 member, oh, you can only use the dirty wall ball, or you can only use the frayed skipping rope.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Feel free to
You
use
can-
all of the equipment that I had
Yeah, yeah.
when you signed up.
You can use the squeaky bar, and you could use you can use the barbell with blood on it, but not the clean one.
Yeah. The barbell that I haven't cleaned since 2010 is all yours. This is so good. I should be taking notes here.
Okay. There's a kind of a thing with CrossFit as well, where there are there's kind of a few different types of CrossFit gyms, let's say. So I see them as there's like a community gym, like a fitness gym where you go, you do your classes, and that's what you do. That's what you go there for. You go and you do your classes, and you might go 3 times a week. Some people might go 5 times a week, whatever. And then there's like competitive gyms, like like where there's a big focus on the open, because there's a focus beyond the open, and there's a big focus, they might have some games athletes, they might have like a team going to the games or whatever. And then obviously those gyms have a difficult balance to make, because if somebody is heading towards being a games athlete, chances are they're not very flush with cash, because it's not a very lucrative line of business to be in. So you obviously have to balance that out with keeping the other side of the gym happy, the community gym happy, or the people who are going for their fitness happy. Is there a danger of trying to do both? Like, is the balancing act like difficult to get right? Because I just think people are always people, and they're always going to look for or some people are always going to look for like favorites, or an opportunity to feel slighted, or an opportunity to feel left out, or to feel like not as good, or that kind of stuff. Like, is there anything there, do you think, about like possible problems arising when you have like say a competition track, and then like an everyday track, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think you're dead on. What happens is that the gym finds itself serving two masters, and they profess that their mission is to improve the fitness of the everyday, Jim and Joanne. But they are also kind of idolizing this person who is more fit than anybody else, and just by nature of what they do, they don't attend the regular classes, and they do their own programming off to the side, and they have their own little, I wouldn't call it a clique, but they have their own little group of friends who are also interested in competition. And many gyms will say like that fragmented our culture. The weird part was that, if you look at NFL or strength and conditioning gyms that are owned by NFL players, you don't have that problem, because the people who are high level playing in the NFL, they are paying for personal training. Like, they're paying more than anybody else. But in a CrossFit gym, it's the opposite. The people who are consuming the most resources, coaching, time, equipment, access, spilling the most chalk on the floor, are the people who are often paying the least, or like trading free coaching against access to the gym, right? And the problem there is that you have a really unclear mission. And so people who are thinking about joining your gym, they see you talking about this is for everybody and you don't have to be in shape to start. And then your social media is full of torn hands and people like wearing Lycra and competing like crazy. And so they're not successful because of that. And so when we started removing CrossFit messaging from our brand at Catalyst, we got really super clear. Like, our mission is to extend the longevity and quality of life of 7,000 people in our city, period. And here's why the number is 7,000. Here's why we're working with 150 at a time. Here's what longevity means. And when we started publishing that stuff, we started getting a lot of notice again. And we actually just won the business of the year in the city of 70,000 people, because I said, why Catalyst? And they said, we know what your mission is and we see you achieving it.
Wow, congrats. That's cool. Especially after so long. Like, it's easy to, be a bit more hidden after so long. So something that, okay, with CrossFit's obviously been through a bit of a PR washing machine, we'll say, for the last like 18 months, where it like there's just a lot of stuff happened to the business. Like, you know, it changed hands. You had like just all of the controversy around the pre-changing of hands, then it changed hands, then the CEO stepped whatever aside, down, up, I don't know. And then Castro was fired, and then Castro came back, and there's just loads of different stuff happening. And through all of that, one of the things that happened is the affiliate rate stayed the same, with a view to it going up in time, I think was the messaging that was sent out. And a lot of people during that period unaffiliated or de-affiliated or whatever, and they left due to the controversy, and it was that kind of like straw that broke the camel's back scenario, where they were like, okay, fuck it, like, you know, this is just, we're gone beyond now, so I'm finished. And now we're seeing the cost of the level 1 is going up, as it has gone up, and the cost of the affiliation fee will be going up. And we still have that scenario now, currently anyway, that grandfathering that you're talking about, where some original affiliates are paying less than, say, like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, affiliates are paying less than if I affiliated which would, why would I do that? But if I did, but like, is it worth, say if I opened a gym tomorrow, is it worth affiliating to CrossFit now for a gym that's opening now? Like, I know that, so say if I do my level 1 and I understand the methodology, or to my level of it anyway, and I'm a good coach and I know how to coach, and I'm coaching, like, you know, in that like CrossFit, not CrossFit way, which I think is a bit shitty, like, to be honest. I think, you know, just on a point of principle, if you're using the methodology, you should just call it what it is and pay for calling it what it is. But I know that a lot of people now are toying with the idea of either re-affiliating, or they're opening a gym and they're thinking, is it, like, I like CrossFit and I like the methodology and I like the message and I like, you know, everything that it preaches, but is it worth, like, as a business, is it worth me paying $3,000 plus a year to just say CrossFit, like, to appear on a map?
So from a data perspective, and I'm speaking very broadly here because there are pockets even in the US where I would give a different answer. But if you are in Europe, then yes, absolutely. If you are in the US, I'm not sure that putting CrossFit on your door is going to help you get a lot of early clients. What it will do, though, is if you are the best CrossFit, is you will attract a lot of like the best CrossFitters from other gyms. And so the play in the States is not just the affiliate. It's like you have to build the best CrossFit gym right out of the box if you want to be successful. It's very hard to start a CrossFit gym the way that I did, which is like in a garage space now, you know, in the States. In Europe, it's a different matter. And it's because as far as like trend data goes, we tend to find that things that worked 3 years ago in the States are now super effective in Europe. You know, and I spoke at a couple of CrossFit events in Europe a few years ago, and this was really like largely the feedback that the audience was giving us too, was we're 5 years behind, we're 3 years behind. And it's just, that's just, you know, market maturation basically. So there are some places where existing affiliates still get a lot of value from CrossFit, like the SEO value, for example, in Charlotte. If you've been around for 10 years, it's worth paying the affiliation. If you're in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and there are no CrossFit gyms left, like, it doesn't pay to be the only one. And to be honest, like a lot of our people who would describe themselves as CrossFitters are gone. So it's a complicated answer, and I'm sorry that I can't say yes or no, but I will repeat something that I said to Nicole Carroll last week, which is I think you would be better to charge twice as much, but make it worth it, instead of charging what you're currently charging and making it, you know, what it is now.
Yeah. Like, what about like tiered systems? Even like, say, in a gym, like if you have a tiered system of, say, I know a lot of gyms do like unlimited membership, where you can go to any amount of classes you want, or any amount of, you know, open gym or whatever. Is there like is it because of the headache it creates, or because of the effort required in installing it, that people don't have, say, like, I don't know, like platinum membership where you can go to everything, or like gold membership where you can go like once a day, or like, silver membership where you can go like, once a day off peak or whatever? Is it just the headache around that people don't do it? And I'm thinking of, like, say, CrossFit as well, where they could charge what they currently charge to just say, I am a CrossFit gym. And then they could charge more to say, I am a CrossFit gym and I have access to the CAP programming. Or they could charge more to say,
Mhm.
I'm a CrossFit gym, I have access to CAP programming, and I get first dibs on seminars or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think they're headed in that direction, but the added value that would increase the price is probably business coaching. And so the analogy that we use is like a CrossFit affiliation for many people is like finding oil in your backyard. On the face of it, it looks like you just won the lottery. But if you don't have the tools to safely extract the oil and like actually use the brand effectively, it's not going to help you, and it might mess up your environment. And I don't just want to throw that out there as a scare tactic. This is my experience in working with 2,000 gyms, and there are 10,000 former CrossFit affiliates who might agree. But this adding the business coaching to increase value is on the roadmap, and I do know that it's on the roadmap because they approached us first and said, we want to do this thing. Ultimately, we turned the deal down for a few different reasons, but hopefully they'll be able to provide a data supported approach to growing a gym for affiliates who want to buy that. Really what's happened up to this point is they've just left it to us. And, in meetings with HQ, and this is a 10-year discussion, by the way, where we would go out and talk with like HQ leadership staff at Santa Cruz, or they would just call us, or they would send media to cover our stuff. It's always been like, yeah, collecting data from gyms is a great idea. You should do that. We are never going to do that. And now finally they have a different priority, right? The mission has changed, and the people who are in place have very strong business acumen. Like Gary Gaines is a great example, very smart guy. And he understands like business coaching will quadruple the value of most gyms. And so they want to make that part of their package. So we're going to continue to do that independently through Two Brain Business instead of working directly as a CrossFit partner. But, I think they will have some options eventually.
Yeah. It's interesting because I suppose originally it was like, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Was the kind of message. But what that has led to in some instances is gyms where there's like amazing coaching and amazing, effort put into facilities and stuff. And there's other gyms where it's like, yeah, we do CrossFit, it's rough and ready. There's like cement floors and like, rusty barbells, and just,
Yeah.
I write a workout on the board and it's 100 wall balls, 100 GHDs, 100 whatever, and it's led to that kind of, I don't know, like, I have the level 1 done, so fuck it, I can write whatever I want on the whiteboard. I'm a coach, like that.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a kind of virus of that, I think.
Well, the interesting thing is that like the quality of coaching is not necessarily any kind of predictor of success. And so like when Greg set up the affiliate model, he was building it because he thought someday he might have 5 affiliates, and this doesn't come from him, but I have spent time with Greg, and I've spent time with his attorneys and many people at HQ. And one of my favorite quotes, I forget, we were at St. Jude Children's Hospital, in Memphis, and he turns to his head of legal, Dale Saran, at the time, and he says, "Hey, next time I start a $1 billion company in my garage, remind me not to fuck that up." And it just showed me like the system that was built to accommodate 4 people who wanted to license his name, there's going to be flaws. And Greg's a libertarian. He was wide open with like just letting people fail. Once in a meeting, I even brought that up to him. Like, people are so devout to CrossFit that they will risk everything and fail and still love CrossFit and not blame you. Like, how do you feel about that? Or does it stress you out? And he said, no, that's what's supposed to happen. Like the weaker gyms will go out of business, and the coaches from those gyms will get jobs at other gyms, and the clients will go to the better gym, and over time, like, the cream will rise. That hasn't been my experience, but that in theory was how it was all set up.
Yeah, natural selection, basically, I guess.
Yeah, and you know what? Spanned over 100 years, that's probably valid, right?
Yeah.
The problem is that when you get people who are 3 years into a lease, and they're looking down the barrel of another $100,000 commitment for 3 more years, their family is not doing well. They've got stress at home. They're broke. They're burned out. They don't want to coach another burpee tomorrow. That's when shit gets really real. And like, that's where I have a lot of empathy, because I've been there. So we don't want any gyms to fail.
You mentioned early on that you still have a mentor.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Is that like, is there a codependence on mentors? As in, like, is there when you start out with someone, is there a timeline of like, okay, we'll work together for probably like 6 months and then you should be good to go? Or is it like, does it depend person to person?
It certainly depends. And when you start out, the first mentor that you get is going to be excellent at the generalities. So my first mentor came from the steel industry, and he taught me about systems and processes. He told me not to buy advertising until I was ready to scale, basically. And that's why my first blog was called Don't Buy Ads. And at the time, that's exactly what I needed, but he knew nothing about fitness. And then over time, as my needs evolved, my mentorship began to get more and more specific. And so like the mentors that I have now, they work with me one-on-one on acquiring some of our vendors, or like reinvesting in like overlapping businesses, or even acquiring competitors. So like that is not information that I needed 10 years ago. It would not have helped me. So yeah. And then what I'll typically do is like find a mentor who has done the step that's right in front of me successfully. So I had a different mentor to take Two Brain from 250K to $1 million to 3, 3 to 4. And then like, to where it is now, it's more like a team effort.
And when you look, like, would you quantify, would you declare your company a success? And then I guess, what are the markers that you look for? So obviously it's different. A gym is different or whatever. Like, there's different things you look for. But like, say for you and the business that you run, are you like, yes, it's successful, and it's successful because of this, this, and this, or do the this, and this change year to year?
Yeah. So what happens over time as you mature is you just get better at defining what success is going to mean, right? So when you start off your gym, you're like, okay, how many clients do you want? Or how will you measure success? And you'll say like, every client I can get, more clients is the answer. And then over time, you start to refine that down, and you start to say like, what will realistically make an impact here? And so for me, that's training or coaching 10% of the population over the 30-year span that I own Catalyst. I think that'll have a meaningful impact in my city. And then the other metrics of success that we use for Two Brain Business are, we want to impact or change the lives of 1 million people through fitness coaching. To do that, we will have to make 10,000 gyms effective and sustainable. We're going to start by getting 5,000 gym owners to earn $100,000 a year or more, and 500 gym owners to $1 million a year or more, and 5 gym owners to 10 million or more. So we track against those metrics. We just awarded our first 18 millionaires of 2022 at Summit last weekend. And that's how we measure success. It's like, are the clients getting successful? Are they reaching success faster than we ever did? Are they becoming successful faster than the person a year ago did? And then personally, my personal mission now is to give away $1 million a year. And so
I'll take it.
Okay. So my family tracks success against that, but yeah.
Yeah. Are you, do you ever still coach?
I'm sorry?
Do you ever still coach? Do you ever still do PTs or anything?
Not fitness, no. So I get excited about it. I don't miss the instruction of the techniques, right? Because I mean, I coached fitness for over 20 years. And so coaching the air squat for the millionth time loses its luster. However, introducing somebody to fitness is a different thing. And, seeing the holy shit, I did that in their eyes, I mean, that never, ever gets old. And I think I probably appreciate it more now that I do it less. So, like, I don't work in my gym at all anymore. I have a general manager. He has a team of coaches, but I mentor those coaches sometimes. And, when I have an opportunity to introduce somebody to fitness or to a healthy habit or how to use their wearable watch to lose weight, I get a big kick out of that. And, so I'll often call up friends that I meet. It's a parent on my kid's hockey team and I invite them for a bike ride. Like, I love that. But as far as like coaching fitness in my gym, that's better left in the hands of people who are extremely passionate about doing it every day.
That's fair. Well, I feel like I could talk to you all day, but we'll finish with a quick fire.
Oh, thanks, man. This is amazing. Yeah. I can't believe it's been over an hour already. Okay. Here we go.
Okay. So dumbbell or barbell?
What if the answer to every question is it depends?
Oh, then we just have to start the whole interview over again.
Dumbbell or barbell? If I had to pick one thing, it'd probably be a barbell. I mean, before I was into CrossFit, I was a power lifter, and I still just like deadlifting.
Rings or bar?
Bar. Maybe the answer is going to be a bar for all of these. I don't know. I do have a set of rings hanging in my garage, but there's also like 3 different barbells under them. So 3-1 barbell wins.
Oh, I meant like bar, pull-up bar.
Oh, rings.
Okay. Ski or row?
If we're talking Concept 2 machines, then row. But if we're talking, I can go outside and ski. I mean, I do that almost every day. We have a 50-acre farm with ski trails on it, so I'd much prefer that.
Wow. Did you like are the trails like man-made? Like, have you created them, like, or are they there naturally?
Yeah, so we actually did this backwards. So we purchased the farm and there were some trails on it, and we started making more trails. And then just, weeks ago, we planted 12,000 trees on this farm in what used to be pasture. And we flagged out where we wanted the trails to be and planted the trees around them.
How do you not own a tux? If you're planting 12,000 trees
I don't want to.
Acre farm.
Back then, I couldn't own a tux. Now I could, but don't want to. I mean, right. How do you not own a tux?
Bike or run?
Bike. I'm a cyclist. I was a competitive mountain biker before I found powerlifting, which was before I found CrossFit. And then when my cortisol levels were just too high, I went back to the bike, and now I've been training as a cyclist again for about 3 years.
That's cool. Squat or bench?
Squat. I have never been a good bench presser. I think my best competition lift was like 320, which is not something to be proud of. Like, that's not a competition lift,
That's fair. Coach or mentor?
So they have different meanings. So I have coaches for fitness who tell me exactly what to do. And I have a psychotherapist who I would call a coach, because she just opens me up to see that I already know the answer and just dig down and get to the answer. Mentors for me are people who have done exactly where I want to be. And so I spend about $200,000 a year on mentors and coaches combined, but the lion's share of that would go to mentors.
Wow. $200,000 a year.
Yeah, and in the first $500 I ever spent on a mentor, I wrote on a check that should have bounced. And but that's the thing, is like, mentorship is really the only place in the fitness industry, and maybe in business, where you can invest $1. Usually you'll get $2 to $3 back right away, but over time that'll compound forever. It's really hard to get that kind of ROI anywhere else.
Yeah.
And
You're
coaching
amazing,
too,
man.
right? Yeah.
You're an amazing man.
Thank you.
I think, like you kind of said it at the start, that there's a lot of business advisors out there, but I think there's not a lot that have like been really close to the edge, like been on the edge of like basically about to fall off, pull themselves back through getting help from someone like you, and then found other people like you to help you get better at it, and then found other people like you were originally to help. I think it's remarkable what you've done. I
Thank you.
think you should go and buy a tux though, and just wear it to your nephew's house. just like stand in his driveway and wave. Listen, thanks very much. I really appreciate you coming on, man, and everything you've done for the fitness industry. It's remarkable the amount of people that you're helping and continue to help, and I hope you keep going.
Thank you very much. Fantastic questions, Peter. So good.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. This is coming out. Hang on, I'll tell you specifically. Yep. Do you ever use Notion?
No.
You kind of strike me as a pen and paper guy, but it's like an app, and you could do like to-do lists.
100%. Yep.
You can do like to-do lists on it. I like it. The 24th. So that's like next Friday.
Oh, wonderful.